How are you going, everyone? And today this is just going to be more of a fun video, and I'll be discussing simply what art style should Dragon Ball Super have when it gets back. And keep in mind, this will be just my opinions, and I know everyone has their favorite animators, etc. So everyone's views on this might be a little different on how Super should look, but here I go. So in my opinion, I think that Dragon Ball Super, since it is a sequel following on after Z, it should therefore follow the art style at the end of Z, and I think it should at least attempt to follow how the manga looked at this time. And in DBS Broly, we did see something like that. And so to start off, I will just compare the various art styles so far, so both in the previous movie and TV series, and how faithful it was in this regard to both Dragon Ball Z and the manga. So in the manga, Vegeta in this arc was drawn with usually a indent to the side of his face and jaw. The ears weren't as large as the early days, and the nose curved slightly inwards on the top here. And when looking at this character sheet behind the cut through, I do see all those traits in regards to the curved nose and the widow's peak being still quite large, and the eyes still having that blocky look, as well as the muscles conveying a very similar shape language to the manga. And the clothing, especially like with the boots, they have several pen strokes here and there and look very similar overall to the manga. So I think this character sheet has done quite a good job overall in matching the sheets to the style of the manga. And although this sheet is from Battle of the Gods, I do believe it was repurposed for DBS, and regardless, Yamamori still draws Vegeta and other characters pretty much the same way. So as you can see, the nose doesn't curve inwards, the side of the jaw also has very little curve and is more of just like a straight line. The eyes, however, are quite faithful to the way Toriyama would draw them, and the ears do look very similar to Toriyama's, and there is a couple of pen strokes on the armor which Toriyama again would also do, and I think that these features are quite well drawn. However, the widow's peak is quite different to how it was in the character sheets from Z and the manga, being more wider at the top. And the neck is also quite large and thick, and his head in general feels a little more wider, whereas in both the anime and manga, it was more narrow and sleek, I guess you could say. Although I will say the anatomy in regards to the arms is quite faithful to the manga and anime, and he feels quite bulk overall. Although the gloves do kind of feel a little like they're glued to his hand, and the boots have a little less detail, and I feel like the same goes for the other designs as well, like Vegeta, for example, who in the character sheets of Z really communicated and had a very similar feel to the manga in regards to the more chiseled look to the face, etc., whereas in DBS it kind of went the opposite way. But the sheets for DBS Broly made some large changes, and in my opinion made the characters look a little too young originally, but I do believe the ones that came later on, such as this one of Vegeta, look amazing and both replicating the style of the manga in this era and the anime. I mean, just comparing it to Nakatsu sheets, I mean, they look very similar in all regards, and especially to all the features of the face and head I discussed before, although one minor difference is that he does look just a little less bulk. Although besides that, I mean, there are some points that make it even slightly more closer to the manga, such as the widow's peak and the eyebrows being just that little extra bit thicker. So far in the art style, I think we are going in a good direction. And throughout the movie, the Boo and even Cell arc look shone through even more with the added freedom the animators were given, but also in regards to the shading style and colours. For example, like in Z, as you probably realise, it often curved outwards, whereas in Super it often curved inwards. And as I discussed in Why Does Modern Anime Feel Plastic video, the tones chosen in DBZ went usually to the warmer side of the colour chart, whereas in Super they go straight down, making the character feel plastic. But equally in the anime or manga, whether it was promotional posters or whatever, the tones used often were quite rich and contrasted really well, and in DBS Broly this followed on with this so well. I mean, look how alive and rich the characters feel, but at the same time how three-dimensional they feel. So I feel that when DBS returns, it should follow in this style in regards to character designs, colours, etc. But not only that, the filter added gives a soft gradient and makes the line work look slightly rough like it did in DBZ, which of course was done traditionally on cells. So not only does it follow the style of the Boo arc in both the manga and anime fairly well, it also has a fresh aesthetic due to the filter, so I think it's a win-win. So you might be thinking now, wait, so you pretty much just want the art style when the series returns to look like DBS Broly, why didn't you just say that from the start? But the truth is, I don't want it to just look like DBS Broly, I want a little extra. So one of the first things I would like to give a fresh feel to the series and to make the artwork even closer to the manga even again is something that both Maeda and Saito always made sure to do in their work, and that is all the gritty detail that they used to add to the face. I would love to see in the new character sheets and just in the general art direction overall, if there was more pen strokes under the eyes, shading on the chin, thicker line work, and shading out of muscles with additional pen strokes. I personally love how gritty of a feel this gave in late Dragon Ball and early DBZ, and imagine how good it would look with the filter. I mean, not only do I think that this would look great, but it would also give a stronger manga feel to the show, but at the same time something a little different that hasn't appeared in the series for such a long time. And a perfect example of how I like Dragon Ball Super to look is through Saito's recent work. I mean, I love the more refined and angular look to the jaw compared to DBS, and even the character sheets for DBS Broly for that matter, but also the additional shading and pen strokes he adds to the character still, and also how close it looks to Toriyama's work from the Buu arc. And I just really wish Saito would come back. But as I said, one thing I wouldn't say I necessarily disliked or thought was bad, but I thought could be improved on is how minimalist the shading was and how rounded the faces were on some of the posters and even several pieces of artwork throughout the film, where I feel like the characters lost some dimension and just, didn't feel as three-dimensional as they might have in Z, but also feel a little less fearsome and threatening, if you get what I'm saying. And additionally, didn't really follow the character designs for either the Buu arc in both manga and anime. But I still personally think it is a definite improvement on the current art style of DBS, so don't get me wrong there, and I really love the colours in this piece, but what I would personally like is to strike a balance and keep the two tones of shading instead of multiple highlights everywhere, but to still give more definition to the various muscle groups, like around the neck for example with Cell here, instead of just doing a general shade across. And a perfect example of this is this piece done by Shida, which not only has two tones, but yet it defines all the muscle groups very well, and the body isn't drawn so rounded like, but at the same time it doesn't feel plastic and stiff. And so what my ideal look to Dragon Ball Super would be is to try and get even closer to the more refined and realistic look we saw in the Cell arc and Buu arc through Toriyama's work, and just like Saito has done in his recent illustrations, but also to try and replicate that gritty feel that was felt earlier in the series with more pen strokes and thicker line work, which I think would be perfect to bring in more for fight scenes and carries that manga spirit. And with colouring instead of all the plastic tones and highlights, let's instead take a note from DBZ and from Dragon Ball Super Broly and continue on with the more vibrant colours that also create excellent contrast, but also make sure not to get too minimalist with the tones. And I believe with all that I have mentioned, this would give the series a fresh feel and herald kind of more back to the days of Z, but still adding something different at the same time. And so I decided to actually take the image Saito did and add some colour to it, and just imagine a what if scenario if this could be the character design for Goku and DBS. And for it, I went with more manga themed colours for something a little different. And personally, I would love if the character designs looked something like this. I just love all the pen strokes he has to his work and the more refined look to the face, as I said before, seen later in the series, and how well he can emulate Toriyama's work in general. But again, this is just my opinion. As I said, I know that plenty of you might prefer Shintani's softer take on Dragon Ball, even maybe Takahashi's take on characters. But whatever, at the end of the day, I think it's all great artwork. I love the new direction that the art style took in DBS Broly, and I would really just like Saito to draw more Dragon Ball. Thank you for watching and for the continued support, and I will see you in the next video.